to live and to love the gospel of the Lord.
Heart to Heart, a Catholic media ministry, presents an inspiring gospel reflection by Father Michael Sparrow. Father Michael is a Jesuit priest working as a writer and retreat master at the Bellarmine Jesuit Retreat House outside Chicago.
The Lord be with you. And with your spirit. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. When Jesus and his disciples arrived in Bethsaida, people brought to him a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. Putting spittle in his eyes, he laid his hands on the man and asked, "Do you see anything?" Looking up, the man replied, I see people like trees and walking about." Then he laid his hands on the man's eyes a second time, and he saw clearly. His sight was restored, and he could see everything distinctly. Then he sent him home and said, "Do not even go into the village." The Gospel of the Lord. Most all of Jesus's healings take place instantaneously, or at least with one movement or directive from Jesus to the person that's being healed. Today's gospel is the sole exception, that it takes a double dose of Jesus's healing hands for the man to be healed. Why is that? We don't know. Perhaps the man's faith was insufficient. So often after Jesus heals, he says, "Go now, your faith has healed you." Maybe the man's faith was weak. Or maybe Jesus was exhausted from a busy day of healing. We don't know. But whatever the reason was, Jesus comes back and lays his hands on the man's eyes the second time, and only then does he see distinctly. I was thinking about that, and I said, that gives us so much hope, because so often in our lives, things don't happen instantaneously. They only unfold gradually in our lives. Physical healing as well as spiritual healing. You go to the doctor, he may give you some medications, or you break a bone and it's set. It could take weeks, sometimes months to heal, and then there's the therapy in addition to that to get back to where you were. We know that to be true physically, and certainly that's true spiritually as well. Broken hearts, broken souls, wounded spirits can take a long time to heal. I've been working with military veterans for some time now, and we're all very aware of the traumas of war with PTSD. But one of the things that has been recently documented is a thing called moral injury, where soldiers are forced going into battle to do things that violate their moral code. Thou shalt not kill being the best example, and yet soldiers are commissioned to do exactly that. The horrors of war are not simply a psychological trauma. It can take a long time to be able to heal from what they've seen, experienced, or been a part of. Think of a woman or a man who has participated in an abortion. I've been a Project Rachel priest for many years now, and have been privileged to pray with people who have participated in abortions. You can go and you can have your sin forgiven in the sacrament of confession, But the sense of guilt and shame and inner healing that often lingers long after that action, long after even going to confession, is a healing process that is important to participate in. If any of you are fans of the Chosen television series, in one of the through lines in season 3 is that Peter's wife, Eden, has a miscarriage when Peter is away with Jesus on mission. And the trauma that brings to her and the trauma it brings into their marriage takes a long time to heal. If any of you have lost children, miscarried, or lost a loved one, you know how difficult that can be. The loss of a child creates a tremendous stress on a marriage. There's something like 75 to 80% of marriages that lose a young child end up in divorce because the sense of guilt and fear and shame is so overwhelming. It can take a long time to heal after a divorce or a breakup. If anyone has experienced sexual abuse, those wounds can take a lifetime to heal. And we know from the 12-step program that anyone that is struggling with an addiction, it's a lifelong situation. You're never cured of your alcoholism. It's a question of managing it so the addiction doesn't overwhelm your life. My point is, healing can take a long time. It unfolds in stages as our faith deepens over stages. We don't simply come to faith in Jesus and say, I get it all. It's a gradual growth, which is part of the reason why we need to continue to avail ourselves by meditating on God's word and participating in the sacraments. It unfolds over time as we deepen that intimacy with Jesus. I was thinking about where does this recently come alive for me within my own life? And I thought of this example. As I said, I've been working on these military retreats for some time, and actually tomorrow I'm going to be going down to Alabama with a team of veterans, and we're seed planting our retreat program down there in the Huntsville, Alabama area, which is rich in military veterans. As I've been participating in these military veterans retreats, I've often think of my dad, who was a veteran in World War II. He never spoke much about his experience until shortly before he died. And then he opened up his heart and talked about some of the trauma he had experienced in World War II. My dad had a problem with anger. And it's taken me a long time to be able to forgive my dad, because he would erupt and ruin family celebrations. He would frequently in the evenings, he'd be arguing with my mother, and my dad was always the one who started the fight. And then he would never apologize. The next day, he would just pretend like nothing happened. It made me so angry, and I talked to my mom about it, and she said, Michael, you just have to accept that that's the way your father is. The words, I am sorry, are not part of his vocabulary. He just can't say it. Well, it took years of therapy and spiritual direction, forgiving him, and I thought I forgave him. But then I'm doing these military retreats, and my relationship with my dad rises up to the surface. Now, my dad died in 1998. So like 24 years ago. It'll be 25 years this year. And after one of those military retreats a year ago, my dad came to me in a dream. And he had a very sad look on his face, and he said, Michael, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt you and I hurt the family. That touched me deeply. And I said, Dad, I forgive you. But you know what? 3 months later, I had forgotten that I had that dream. Well, it was just a dream. And we're doing another military retreat, and what rises up is this anger inside me at my dad. A few weeks after the veterans retreat, my dad comes to me a second time. And this time he's got tears in his eyes. And he says, Michael, I'm sorry, forgive me. And I said, with tears in my eyes, Dad, I forgive you. 3 months later, I forget that I had the dream. We have another military retreat. I experienced this anger coming up again a third time after the retreat. My dad comes back, and this time he is sobbing. And he's saying, Michael, will you forgive me? And then in the dream, I remember that I had had 2 dreams previously. You know, have you ever had that experience of a dream within a dream? And I recognized, wait a minute, I've been here before. This is the 3rd time. And I said, Dad, I am so sorry. I want to forgive you. I do forgive you. I choose to forgive you. And we embrace. And I wake up. And so I immediately write down, this is the 3rd time I've had this dream. Remember this. Do not forget it. I tell you this story because my dad died 24 years ago. And I've gone through some therapy in terms of dealing with it and spiritual direction. I've talked about it in the retreats. And I thought, man, I've forgiven my dad. That's in the past. But there are these layers of forgiveness. St. Thomas Aquinas said there's like over 20 layers of forgiveness. Now, I had gone down those layers, and I thought I had reached the final layer. But obviously I hadn't, because this kept coming up in my subconscious. I share that personal experience with you, hopefully to give you encouragement, to continue to work through this process of healing, which can take a very long time. Now, put this in perspective. The Big Bang, the opening of the universe, our best scientific estimation on that is that it happened 13.8 billion years ago. That's the beginning of creation, 13.8 billion years ago. Our Earth, the best estimate, our Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. Human beings as a genus appeared on this Earth a few million years ago. But Homo sapiens, Johnny-come-latelys, only appeared about 300,000 years ago. Ponder that the next time you're lamenting the slow process of healing, or you're impatiently waiting at a traffic light to turn green, or you're stuck behind a slow-moving freight train. Good things come to those who wait in hope.
Heart to heart, hand in hand, praying for grace to understand. Spirit of Jesus,